Dark chosen ones, 99%, don't know your suffering was spiritually scripted. There's something you've carried your entire life, something heavy, invisible, and often misunderstood. You've felt it in your chest like gravity, like a quiet haunting that never fully leaves. It doesn't matter how much you try to meditate, how successful you become, how much you try to smile through the day, there's this unshakable undercurrent of suffering, a loneliness that runs deeper than words. And here's the truth that almost no one will tell you: it was never random. Your suffering was not a punishment. It wasn't karma. It wasn't bad luck or a cruel universe. It was spiritually scripted, designed and woven into the fabric of your life, because you are not ordinary. You are one of the dark chosen ones. And 99% of people, like you, have no idea what that really means. You see, there's a divine paradox that most people never look deep enough to understand. The most powerful souls are often given the harshest beginnings, not because they're cursed, but because they came here to carry something that most people couldn't survive, let alone transform. If you've ever wondered why your life has been so hard, why it feels like you were thrown into chaos while others were given peace, this is why. Your path was never meant to be smooth, it was meant to be sacred. Your pain has been your initiation. Your loneliness, your trauma, your confusion, these didn't happen to you. They happened for a reason, because something in you was built to awaken through the dark.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But here's the part they don't teach in school, in therapy, or even in many spiritual circles. When you're one of the dark chosen ones, your life is not meant to follow the normal script. You're not here to fit in. You're not here to be comfortable. You're here to remember. And that remembering only begins when you've been broken enough to stop pretending. Most people around you are still asleep, still wrapped in the illusion of safety and control. But your suffering ripped that illusion away. It forced you to question everything. And that questioning is the doorway. Imagine this. Before you were born, your soul agreed to carry a particular frequency into this world. A frequency of healing, of disruption, of raw truth. But that frequency couldn't be accessed through ease. It could only be awakened through fire. That's why your childhood may have felt like a war zone. That's why your relationships cracked you open. That's why you've always felt different, even when you tried to blend in. You were never meant to be like them. You were meant to remember the deeper game being played here. You were meant to be cracked open so the light could pour in, not the soft, comforting light most people imagine, but the fierce, blinding light of truth. The kind of truth that doesn't just soothe, it transforms. But let's get real. When you're in the middle of it, when the nights are long and the pain is sharp, this all sounds like pretty words. It doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a curse. It feels like abandonment. It feels like no one understands what you carry. And that's part of the script too. Because isolation is a forge. It's where the deepest parts of you are revealed. When no one is clapping, when no one sees your tears, when you're forced to face the void and ask, why am I here? That's the moment the spiritual script begins to unfold. That's the moment the first veil lifts. Because only in the silence of your suffering can you begin to hear the voice beneath the chaos. And what is that voice telling you? It's saying you are not broken, you are being rebuilt. Every time you thought you were falling apart, something deeper was being restructured. Something ancient was being reawakened. You came here with code spiritual DNA that doesn't activate under comfort. It only activates under pressure. That's why your struggles have been so precise, why they've hit you in the places that matter most, because each wound was a key, each betrayal a doorway, each breakdown an unlocking. You were not meant to be destroyed. You were meant to be discovered. But here's the thing. Most people never make it past the suffering. They get caught in the story. They believe the lie that they are cursed, unlucky, or not enough. They stay in survival mode. But the chosen, the truly awakened, begin to ask deeper questions. They start to wonder, what if this pain is not the end of me, but the beginning? And that question changes everything. Because once you stop fighting your suffering and start listening to it, the script changes. You begin to see the patterns. You begin to decode the message. And you realize that your suffering was never the main story. It was the setup for something much greater. So I want to ask you something. And I want you to answer with your whole being. What if the very thing you've been trying to escape is the thing that's trying to awaken you? What if your suffering has been preparing you, not punishing you? What if the loneliness you feared is actually the silence required for your real mission to come online? This isn't fantasy. This is ancient truth. Hidden knowledge passed down through initiates, mystics, prophets. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not too sensitive for this world. You are sensitive because you're meant to feel what others ignore. You are strong because you've endured what others couldn't. You are aware because the veil was ripped from your eyes too soon. And yes, that hurts. But it also means you're ready. Ready to stop surviving your pain and start using it. Ready to stop asking for relief and start seeking revelation. You are not a victim. You are a vessel. And this is only the beginning of why you were scripted for the dark. The hidden contract why your soul chose the darkness before you were born. There's a truth buried so deep in your being that even when you hear it, it may feel like a distant echo rather than a revelation. But if you sit with it, breathe into it, and let it land, it will change your relationship with every shadow you've ever faced. Here it is, you chose this. Not consciously, not in this human form, but at the level of soul before the veil was drawn, before your name, your face, your trauma, your timeline, you made a sacred agreement. You signed a hidden contract with the divine. And that contract said, send me into the fire, because I remember who I am. That's the kind of soul you are. You didn't come here to live a soft, easy, forgettable life. You came here to walk through the dark with your eyes open, to face the chaos, the confusion, the suffering, and not run from it, but walk straight through it. Because somewhere in the chambers of your ancient memory, you knew, if I find my power in the dark, I will never be deceived by false light again. That kind of power is unteachable. It can't be downloaded from a course or gifted by a guru or picked up in a book. It has to be earned in the trenches of your own transformation. And that journey begins with the soul's decision to forget the light, so it can earn its way back to remembrance. Do you understand now why you were born into dysfunction, or abandonment, or silence? Why you felt like the black sheep, the outsider, the one who never quite fit in? It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't bad luck. It was design. Your soul needed the contrast. It needed to be immersed in density so that when you finally remembered, it wouldn't just be theory, it would be embodied. You'd carry truth in your bones, not your mind. And that kind of knowing is unshakable. But here's the part that hurts before it heals. When you chose this journey, you also agreed to forget that you chose it. That was part of the contract. Because the forgetting is what makes the remembering so powerful. If you always knew you were destined, if you always knew you were protected, if you always knew there was a reason you wouldn't develop the depth, the empathy, the raw strength that only comes from walking blind through the storm, you had to lose yourself so that when you found yourself again, it would be real. No illusions, no borrowed beliefs, just you, stripped bare and divine. And now you're starting to remember. That's why life has been shaking you lately. Why old wounds are resurfacing? Why the things that used to numb you no longer work? Because the soul contract is activating. You're being called again, not by a voice outside of you, but by the tremble inside your chest that says, there's more. You're not done. Wake up. But here's the secret most will never understand. The darkness wasn't just something you endured. It was something you were meant to carry, not forever, not as your identity, but as your initiation. Because the chosen ones who walk through darkness and come out awake, they carry something the world desperately needs. They carry presence. They carry compassion. They carry truth that doesn't waver when tested. And they become safe spaces for others who are still lost. Not because they have all the answers, but because they've survived the questions. So let me ask you now, what if your suffering wasn't the end of your path, but the beginning of your purpose? What if every scar was a map and every heartbreak a clue? What if the people who hurt you were simply playing the roles your soul needed them to play so you could finally break free from the illusion that you were powerless? I'm not saying it was okay. I'm not saying it didn't hurt. I'm saying it was sacred. And sacred things often come wrapped in pain, because pain is the only language the ego can't ignore. Pain makes you stop. Pain makes you question. And those questions tear holes in your reality, holes that light can finally pour through. You didn't come here to be saved. You came here to remember that you were never lost. And the moment you begin to see your life through the lens of that hidden contract, everything shifts. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? You stop running from the dark and start turning toward it, knowing that your power is hidden in the places you fear the most. You become less interested in appearing healed and more committed to being whole, even if that means sitting with the mess a little longer. Because that's what dark chosen ones do. They don't fake the light. They become the light by walking through every shadow they were told to avoid. Soul alchemy: how to transmute your deepest wounds into raw spiritual power. There comes a point in every dark chosen one's journey where the suffering no longer defines you but begins to refine you. It's subtle at first. A shift in how you respond to what used to break you. You notice yourself breathing through the triggers instead of reacting. You catch yourself observing the pain instead of drowning in it. It's not that the weight is gone, it's that your spine has gotten stronger. And that's when you start to realize you're not here to escape the darkness. You're here to alchemize it. Soul alchemy is the sacred process of turning your most painful experiences into your greatest spiritual power. It doesn't mean pretending everything is okay. It doesn't mean dressing up your wounds in spiritual language and calling it enlightenment. It means facing the wound, sitting with it, letting it speak, letting it scream if it has to. Because the wound has wisdom, the pain has a memory, and buried inside it is a piece of your soul that got trapped the moment you decided it was too much to feel. But now, you're strong enough to go back and retrieve it, not to relive the trauma, but to reclaim the treasure hidden beneath it. Most people want to skip this part. They want the healing without the hurting. They want the transformation without the truth. But you were never built for shortcuts. You were built for depth. You came here to transmute, not bypass. That's why your path has been so intense. That's why your emotions are so deep. That's why you can feel the unspoken pain in a room before anyone says a word. Because you are wired for alchemy. You are designed to take darkness and turn it into something sacred. But how do we do that practically? How do we take betrayal, abandonment, shame, and grief and transform them into power? It begins with one radical act: ownership. You must take radical spiritual ownership of your story. That doesn't mean blaming yourself for being hurt. It means acknowledging that your past no longer has to control your present. You stop waiting for apologies. You stop needing closure from people who were never capable of giving it. You stop outsourcing your healing. You stand in front of the mirror, look into your own eyes, and say, "I carry the medicine now." That's when the shift begins. That's when the trauma loses its grip. Because you've stopped feeding it your power. You've stopped letting it define you. You've started integrating it. And integration is the language of alchemy. It's when you stop seeing your pain as a problem and start seeing it as a portal. Every emotion becomes a message. Every trigger becomes a teacher. Every breakdown becomes a sacred container for rebirth. You begin to understand that the very thing you thought would destroy you is the exact thing that's shaping you into who you came here to be. But make no mistake, alchemy is not a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. It's a commitment to walking the path of depth over distraction, truth over comfort, self-honesty over self-protection. It means choosing to feel fully instead of numbing halfway. It means letting yourself grieve what was lost, what never came, what hurt you more than words can say. And it means forgiving not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because forgiveness is the fire that burns the last chains holding your soul hostage. Not the fluffy, performative kind of forgiveness. The real kind. The kind that takes time. The kind that cracks your heart open and teaches you how to love without needing to forget. And through it all, something incredible begins to happen. You start to glow differently. People feel it in your presence. They don't know what it is, but they sense it. A calm, a warmth, a depth that can't be faked. You don't even have to speak it. You radiate it. That's what happens when you alchemize pain into power. You become a living transmission. You become the proof that healing is possible. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And in a world addicted to masks, your truth becomes revolutionary. So let me ask you something, and I want you to feel this question in your bones. What would your life look like if you stopped running from your wounds and started listening to them? What would happen if you treated your pain not as the enemy, but as the elder it truly is? Because that's what it is. A wise teacher. A sacred guide. And it's been waiting patiently for you to stop avoiding it, so it can finally show you the gift hidden underneath. You are not here to be a prisoner of your past. You are here to be a priest of your own power. And that power doesn't come from pretending you're fine. It comes from owning the full spectrum of your experience, the rage, the grief, the confusion, the love, the clarity, all of it. That's what makes you untouchable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can own you anymore. This is the path of the dark chosen ones. We don't run from the fire, we become it. The final awakening, why you were born to lead others out of the darkness. There's a moment in the path of every dark chosen one when the suffering begins to make sense, not just in your personal life, but in the context of something much larger. You start to realize that your healing isn't just for you. Your battles, your scars, your moments of collapse and resurrection, they were never just about your timeline. They were training, sacred preparation. Because what you carry now after everything you've survived is more than just healing, it's leadership. Not the loud, spotlight kind, the quiet, embodied kind that changes people just by being near you. You were born to lead others out of the very darkness you barely escaped yourself. And that's why your path had to be so intense. That's why you couldn't be coddled. Why ease was never your teacher. Because the role you were destined for required depth. It required that you lose your illusions early so you could see clearly when others couldn't. It required that you understand pain so intimately that when someone breaks down in front of you, you don't flinch, you recognize them. You see yourself in their collapse, and you know exactly how to hold space without fixing, guiding without controlling, loving without rescuing. That's the mark of the awakened healer, the spiritual leader forged, not taught. You didn't just survive your story, you decoded it. You found the threads of meaning that most never even notice. And now, you carry a frequency that others are starving for. They won't always know how to describe it, but they'll feel safer around you. They'll feel seen, not because you're trying to perform empathy, but because your very presence says, I understand. I've been there, and I'm not afraid of your pain. That kind of presence is rare. It's sacred, it's world-shifting. And most of all, it's earned. You can't fake it. You can't fast-track it. You can only become it by walking through the exact fire you once tried to escape. But here's the twist most people miss. You don't have to be fully healed to lead. You don't have to have it all figured out. That's the old paradigm, the myth of perfection. The truth is, your honesty is more powerful than any image of flawlessness. Your willingness to keep showing up, even when you're still healing, is what makes you magnetic. Because people don't need a savior. They need a mirror. Someone who gives them permission to be real. Someone who shows them that wounds and wisdom can coexist. That being human and being holy are not opposites, they are partners. So you begin to walk differently. You speak with less noise and more weight. You choose your battles carefully, not because you're afraid to fight, but because your energy has become sacred currency. You stop trying to be understood by those who are still asleep. You stop explaining your worth. You stop shrinking to fit into rooms that can't handle your truth. And instead you build new spaces, new connections, new ways of being in the world that honor who you've become. You're no longer trying to belong in places that were never built for you. You're becoming the place others can belong to. And as you walk this new path, something else happens. You start to see others waking up not because you told them to, but because your presence gave them permission. Your life becomes a signal. A lighthouse in the fog, and the ones who are ready, the other chosen ones still lost in the noise, will find you. They'll feel your frequency before they even know your name. And when they do, you'll recognize them too, because this path is not walked alone. It's walked by a soul family scattered across the planet, each one carrying a piece of the puzzle, each one activating the others simply by being real. And in those moments when someone tells you, because of you I didn't give up, or you helped me see myself for the first time, you'll realize it was all worth it. Every tear, every night you thought it would never get better, every time you questioned your purpose. It wasn't meaningless. It was preparation. You were being sculpted into a vessel of truth so that when the world needed you most, you'd be ready. So I ask you now, not as a challenge, but as a sacred reminder, what are you going to do with everything you've survived? Who might be waiting for your light, your words, your presence right now while you still doubt your own power? Can you see that your healing is not just personal, it's planetary? That your awakening ripples through timelines you cannot see? This is the final awakening. The moment when survival turns into sacred service, when pain transforms into purpose, when you stop looking back at what hurt you and start leaning forward into what's calling you. You are not here to live a small life. You are not here to stay hidden. You are here to lead not from ego, but from essence. This world is starving for truth, for realness, for depth. And you are one of the few who has walked through the dark and come back with fire in your hands. Use it, speak it, share it, not for fame, not for validation, but because the next soul is still trapped in the darkness you escaped, and they will never find their way out unless someone like you goes first. You are the map now. You are the proof. You are the embodiment of what happens when the dark doesn't destroy but awakens. And this is why your suffering was never a mistake. It was the beginning of your becoming. Now go lead.